Hotep, everybody. This is Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network and host of the African History Network show. It is Thursday, February 22nd, 2024, and African American History Month, Black History Month continues. And I've been getting questions on my social media platforms about my new 10-week online course that I teach on the weekend, usually on Saturdays, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. So I'm going to do a preview of that class, go over some of the slides in the class, deal with some of the content, and show you the extensive class outline, class lesson plan that I've put together. Okay, so the lesson plan is already done for all 10 classes, and we did an introduction back on February 3rd. And the class started February 10th. So our next class will be Sunday, special day, Sunday, February 25th, 2024. All right. Now, when we deal with the transatlantic slave trade, we have to understand that we can't start studying our history in slavery. We have to deal with thousands of years of history that leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. And we have the class lesson plan on our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, so you can review the entire 10-week lesson plan. We have to deal with thousands of years of history that leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. And we have to deal with the 800-year occupation of Europe by the Africans known as the Moors, who take the teachings from ancient Kemet, ancient Egypt, into Europe. And these teachings bring Europe out of the Dark Ages. Okay, so this class, I started teaching it in 2017. I've been studying history over 30 years. This class evolved out of a 4.5-hour lecture that I did back in January 2014. And in this 10-week online course, there are over 200 slides that I show you in the class that I put together. We look at 80 to 100 articles. There are 15 books that we reference. You don't have to buy any of these books to follow along in class. The video clips that I show you as well, interviews that I've done with many of our scholars, like Professor James Small, Professor Kabahaya Watakamane, Runoko Rashidi, etc. Dr. David Imhotep also. Okay, so this is a fantastic class. You can register for this class at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Class is on sale right now, $80. We do the sessions live. All the sessions are archived and recorded. You can go back and watch it anytime. And in class session number 2, we looked at some history dealing with African American History Month. We know February is Black History Month, African American History Month, created by Dr. Carter G. Woodson in February 1976. February 1926. It started February 7th, 1926. We know Dr. Carter G. Woodson was the co-founder of the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History, which is now the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, ASALH. We know he was a prolific writer. He wrote numerous books. His most popular book, The Miseducation of the Negro, in 1933. And I also talked about this year's annual theme for African American History Month, which is African Americans and the arts. African Americans and the arts. Okay, so we talked about that as well. And there's been an annual theme for African American History Month since 1928. Since 1928. So we went over this type of information in class number 2 also. All right. So some of the things that we deal with in the class, and I'm going to refer back and forth from the class outline that I put together to the some of the slides in the course also. Okay. So be patient with me as we transition. With the origins of Black History Month and Dr. Carter G. Woodson, we talked about Dink Nesh, which means you are amazing in Amharic, and this was Australopithecus afarensis, These remains at the time that they were found in Ethiopia in 1974 were the oldest remains of any human. This was a pre-human, what's looked at as a pre-human. Australopithecus afarensis, her remains date back 3.2 million years. There's a global timeline of history that we use in the class also that comes from blackpast.org. So they have a good timeline of history. We talked about the Berlin Conference of 1884 and 1885, where these European nations come together to divide Africa, to continue to rape Africa of the mineral wealth, and so they can stop fighting and killing each other over the mineral wealth of Africa. So we deal with some of that history. I talked about a little bit of the history of Juneteenth. June 19th, 1865, Major General Gordon Granger goes into Galveston, Texas. And there was a good article from the New York Times that dealt with how most Americans don't understand the history of Juneteenth. Now, this article came out in it was about June of 2021 when this article came out. But one of the things that people don't seem to understand, and this is why one of the reasons why it's so hard for us to get any type of reparative justice, any type of reparations, okay, any substantial type of reparations, is because Americans are very ignorant of history, okay? Americans are very ignorant of history, regardless of race or ethnicity. So there was this good article from the New York Times. Most Americans know little or nothing about Juneteenth, poll finds, and it found that 60% of Americans knew little or nothing about Juneteenth. And I would argue that most of what they think they know is false, because Juneteenth was not the last day of slavery, okay? Because June 19th, 1865, when Major General Gordon Granger delivered General Order Number 3 in Galveston, Texas, and then he and his troops of almost 2,000 Union Negro soldiers go all throughout Texas to bring Texas back into the Union, okay, because Texas had seceded from the Union. Well, the 13th Amendment is what legally frees the slaves and what legally ends chattel slavery in this country. The 13th Amendment was not ratified until December 6, 1865, when Georgia ratified the 13th Amendment. Okay. The Emancipation Proclamation did not free the slaves. That's January 1st, 1863. And in the class, we look at it, and I tell people to go to archives.gov and read the Emancipation Proclamation, or go to loc.gov, Library of Congress website, and read the Emancipation Proclamation, because it specifically tells you that the territories that are in rebellion, those territories that belong to the Confederacy, those slaves would be free if those territories did not come back into the Union by January 1st, 1863. But it gives exceptions. It gives exceptions to the border states, Maryland, Missouri, Kentucky, and Delaware. They were allowed to keep their slaves. Okay. Maryland did not abolish slavery until November 1864. Okay. And that had to be put on the ballot. They had to vote on that. The Emancipation Proclamation did not free the slaves. So one of the things that we do in this class, from class number 1, is dispel a lot of myths that are out here dealing with history. Okay. If you read, this is an article that we look at in the class. The not quite free state, Maryland dragged its feet on emancipation during the Civil War. Now, this is from Washington Post, September 13th, 2013. Interestingly enough, September 13th is the day before September 14th, 1814, when Francis Scott Key wrote The Defense of Fort McHenry, which was a poem that became known as the Star Spangled Banner. And you see the video that I did dealing with the Black National Anthem and the Star Spangled Banner, how Francis Scott Key was a white supremacist slave owner who thought that African people were mentally inferior, and how the Star Spangled Banner the whole song is a white supremacist song, not just the third stanza. Okay. But the vote was, the final vote was 30,174 in favor of freeing the slaves to 29,799 against. November 1st, 1864, Maryland slaves were declared free only a few months before Congress would approve the 13th Amendment abolishing slavery. Now, this is almost 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. So there's a lot of this history in mainstream media that I hear being repeated during Juneteenth, all this stuff that's just false. Now, Juneteenth is very important. It's very important that Juneteenth became a federal holiday. One, that's the only federal holiday that acknowledges slavery. Okay. You do have Emancipation Day, which is April 16th. Okay. But that's recognized not as much. That's largely celebrated in Washington, D.C. Why is April 16th significant? April 16th, 1862, that's when the Compensated Emancipation Act of 1862 was signed into law by President Abraham Lincoln. It passed Congress, passed the House, passed the Senate. It was a bill sponsored by an abolitionist, Senator Henry L. Tyler, out of Massachusetts. But this bill abolishes slavery in the District of Columbia, and slaveholders in the District of Columbia were paid reparations of up to $300 for each slave that they own. Okay. And as Tremaine Lee on MSNBC talked about Thursday, February 22nd, 2024 on Alex Wagner's show, and he has a podcast dealing with reparations on MSNBC, MSNBC's website, and dealing with podcasts. You had a few, maybe 5 or 6 African Americans who owned slaves because they bought family members out of slavery in the District of Columbia, and they collected on reparations also. Now, the slaves were never, those slaves that were freed were not given reparations. Read this article here from the, this is from Senate.gov. The Zen Education Project has one, but the one from Senate.gov has more information. Okay. Senate.gov is the official website of the U.S. Senate. Landmark legislation, the District of Columbia Compensated Emancipation Act. So I hear people misstate what happened. And I hear people say, I've been on panel discussions, and, you know, I've been on, you see me on Roland Martin Unfiltered on Fridays. I've been on, it's been over 3 years. I started October 20th, 2020, and been on almost every Friday since then. I hear people say, oh, slave owners were given reparations during slavery here in the U.S. The slaves weren't given anything. Okay. This only applied to the District of Columbia. This is why we have to do more research. And this is why a lot of this stuff floating out here dealing with reparations, don't take this the wrong way. A lot of this stuff, Senator Henry L. Wilson, I should say, Senator Henry Wilson, a lot of this stuff is not going to go anywhere. Because if you're seeking a legal remedy to a historical problem, then that would imply that you understand both law and history. And unfortunately, a lot of people pushing this stuff dealing with reparations don't understand either one. And I can listen to them and tell that. A lot of this stuff is not going to go anywhere. They don't know how to make legal arguments. And the other thing is, as we deal within this class, and also in the second class that I teach, dealing with history from 1800 to 1968, race-based policies are illegal at the federal level based upon Title VI of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, Section 601, non-discrimination in federally assisted programs. Nobody wants to have that conversation. Okay. But if we look at this very quickly here, landmark legislation, the District of Columbia Compensated Emancipation Act. On a visit to Washington, D.C. in 1836, the site of a slave auction held in the shadow of the Capitol, the U.S. Capitol, convinced future Senator Henry Wilson of Massachusetts to, quote, give all land to the cause of emancipation, end quote. So he's elected to the U.S. Senate in 1855. This is 6 years before the Civil War begins, April 12, 1861. Senator Henry L. Wilson became a leading voice for the abolition of slavery during the U.S. Civil War. Okay, so make a long story short, the bill passes the House, passes the Senate. Okay, and then President Abraham Lincoln signs it into law April 16th, 1862. The bill freed enslaved people in the District of Columbia and compensated slave owners up to $300 for each person, that they own that was being set free. Now, the Hartford Daily Courant, Courant, celebrated that, quote, not a slave exists in their shackles have fallen, never to be restored, quote. In the months following the enactment of the law, commissioners approved more than 930 petitions granting freedom to 2,989 formerly enslaved people. DC Emancipation Day has been celebrated in the District of Columbia since 1862. Just 5 months later, September 1862, we know that was the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation, September 22nd, 1862. The Emancipation Proclamation was a military strategy that Lincoln used, and the purpose was to bring the South back into the Union. Okay. All right. Now, so read this here at Senate.gov. Senate.gov is the official website of the U.S. Senate. So there are 80 to 100 articles that we look at in the class. We go deep into this history. Okay. And in the second class that I teach on Sundays, we have that class starting up in June. Black resistance movements from the Haitian Revolution, U.S. Civil War, Civil Rights Movement, Black Power Movement, 1800 to 1968. We focus in on that period of history and get deep into this history also. Okay. All right. Now, so we look at things like Juneteenth briefly to dispel some of these myths. We talk about Imhotep, one of the greatest people who ever lived in human history. Imhotep was a philosopher. He was a priest, physician, architect, mathematician, designer of the step pyramid for Nasubiti, Pharaoh Zoser in the third dynasty. And Imhotep means he who comes in peace in the ancient Medu Neter language. And these are some famous statues of Imhotep. Now, this is Imhotep, and this is not Imhotep. In the 2001 movie, The Mummy Returns, the villain's name was, one of the villain's names was Imhotep. And they have this Arab-looking Eurasian actor, Arnold Vosloo, portraying Imhotep. And in the movie, he was a villain. He was evil. Okay. So many of our children will see this and think that one of our greatest ancestors was evil. Okay. And not even of African descent. This is a theft of the history, more cultural appropriation, a theft of the history. Here's a picture of the step pyramid that Imhotep was an architect of. This was for Nasubiti Zoser in the third dynasty. And there's a couple of books also on Imhotep we reference in the class. This one right here by Dr. Malefi Kete Asante, who's a friend of mine. I just interviewed Dr. Asante in April of 2023, dealing with the whole Cleopatra the Seventh controversy and the documentary that Jada Pinkett Smith did in the series African Queens. The Egyptian philosophers, Ancient African Voices from Imhotep to Akhenaten. Okay, excellent book. They talk about all these philosophers: Ptahhotep, Imhotep, Kagemi, Sanchi, all these before Aristotle, Socrates, and Plato. Okay, and Imhotep, we see around 2700 BC he lives. Depending upon which timeline of history you look at, the timelines of history can be 200 to 300 years off. But we know at least 130,000 years of our history has been stolen. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the course outline. And once again, the course, as I said before, the course outline, we have it right on the homepage of our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Right at the top when you see the information for this class. So you can register for this class right now. We do the sessions live. All the sessions are archived and recorded. can go watch it. You can watch it anytime, even after the 10-week online course is over with. You can go back and watch the entire class. Okay. So as soon as you register, you can watch the 2 previous classes and get caught up and join us Sunday, February 25th, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We go through and look at the different dating systems of BC and AD popularized by an English monk named the Venerable Bede. We look at the 1619 Project. We talk about that some, and how a lot of what we know, a lot of what we've been taught about 1619 is false. Okay. And we go through and break that down. And then we deal with the date. Even though 1619 did take place, August 20th, 1619, 29 Negroes are on, or 29 Africans are on the White Lion pirate ship. Okay. The White Lion pirate ship, which was an English pirate ship. A lot of the history surrounding 1619 is false. And when we look at the work from Dr. David Imhotep, who wrote the book, The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence, and who was a friend of mine as well. We know he passed away in 2023. We see that African people have been in the land we call the United States of America going back at least 51,700 years. All right. Now, in 1619, codified slave laws didn't even exist in any of the 13 colonies. Codified slave laws. The first colony to have codified slave laws is going to be Massachusetts in 1641. Comes to Virginia around 1660. It hits the different colonies at different times. The mistake that is made when we retell this history is we think this whole system of slavery existed in all the 13 colonies as soon as those Africans got off the ship. That's not the case at all. And if you read chapter 2 of Before the Mayflower by Lerone Bennett Jr., this is the 6th edition, he lays out a lot of that history. And we see the way we think this history evolved is not actually how it happened. Okay. And that's why you have to study Bacon's Rebellion in 1675, 1676. But this is a historical marker here at in Point Comfort in Virginia. And there's a good article called Much of What We've Been Told About Virginia's 1619 First Africans is Wrong. 1526 doesn't get talked about enough. And you had the Spanish who were trying to set up a permanent settlement here in the Georgia, South Carolina area. And they take 100 African slaves into that area in 1526. Those Africans are going to have a revolt and disappear. It's believed they went to go live with Native Americans. But this is 93 years before Jamestown, Virginia. How is it fixed? 1526 doesn't get talked about. But like I said, African people were here for tens of thousands of years before slavery existed, and we were here for thousands of years before the people who we call Native Americans came into existence. If you read The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence by Dr. David Imhotep, and his new book came out in late 2021, The First Americans Were Africans, Revised and Expanded. On page 14 of his first book, he lays out evidence from an archaeological discovery in 2004 by Dr. Albert Goodyear in Allendale County, South Carolina, that shows an African presence dating back at least 51,700 years ago. And they look at 13 pieces of evidence, 13 different types of evidence. They found artifacts, architecture, campsites, carvings, Egyptian writings, footprints in lava, genetic M174D haploid groups dealing with DNA and genetics, linguistics, paintings, skulls, skeletons, structures, and tools. They found 13 different types of evidence, categories of evidence that thoroughly documents an African presence dating back at least 51,700 years ago. Now, this is before Native Americans came into existence. Now, this is not to take anything away from Native American history, but we all know that African people were the first people on the face of the earth. One of the things we look at in the class are archaeological discoveries. And there was an archaeological discovery coming out of Morocco in June of 2017 that shows how they found Homo sapiens. They found remains of Homo sapiens that date back 300,000 to 350,000 years ago And this was found in Morocco. These are over 100,000 years older than the earliest remains that they had found of Homo sapiens sapiens, or modern man, Homo sapiens, that date back 195,000 years ago in Ethiopia. So the deeper they dig, the blacker the planet gets, the more research they do, the older we get. So when these different archaeological discoveries come out, they have to keep pushing the timelines back. You know, Juvenile had the song Back That Thing Up. When these archaeological discoveries come out, they keep having to back that thing up. They keep having to back the timelines up. And when you study a lot of these discoveries, the scientists are saying that now they have to rethink everything. These archaeological discoveries are pushing the timelines back. And they're saying they have to rethink everything. So we've been led to believe that African people were the first people on earth, but they went all around the world, but did not come to North America. That's a lie. That's a lie. And once we wrap our minds around the concept, and I'm going to go back to the cover of Dr. David Imhotep's book, because this is one of the problems I have when we celebrate African American History Month and don't understand history. If we approach history from the perspective that African people first came to this land that we call the United States of America, conquered and shackled in chains, conquered by Europeans, then you are already starting the conversation with a defeatist attitude and a false concept. No, this was our land stolen from us. This was our land stolen from us. Once we wrap our minds around the concept, because the research has already been done, and you have European archaeologists like Dr. Albert Goodyear who tell the truth. Once we wrap our minds around the concept that this was our land stolen from us, and we did not first come to this land conquered and shackled and chained, you would have a seismic shift overnight in the conscious level of African people in America. Now, this is not saying the transatlantic slave trade did not happen, because you got some people out here that don't study history, don't study chronology of history, and say, well, because Africans were already here, that means transatlantic slave trade did not happen. That's false. All that stuff happened. We were just here tens of thousands of years before we were told that we came here. Okay? And one of the things we do in the class, we look at where Christopher Columbus goes on his voyages, and Columbus never came to the land that we call the United States of America. That's another lie that's told. Columbus is crucial to understanding the expansion of the transatlantic slave trade, especially after Columbus dies in 1506, and then you have the Asiento de Negros, August 1518, signed into law by King Charles V, also known as King Charles I, which drastically of Spain, which drastically expands the transatlantic slave trade. That's also as a result of Christopher Columbus and Bartholomew de las Casas, Right Reverend Bishop Bartholomew de las Casas, traveling on the voyages, some of those voyages with Columbus, seeing the atrocities inflicted on Native Americans, and de las Casas goes to the Pope and says that they need to stop enslaving Native Americans and focus on saving the souls of Native Americans, and they needed to enslave primarily African people, secondarily white people. And this is what's going to happen. Now, he's going to quickly reverse course and regret that and fight for the abolition of slavery, but it's too late then. This thing is exploding, and the Spanish were the second ones involved in the transatlantic slave trade. Now, keep in mind, Columbus sails August 3rd, 1492, late in the same year that the African Moors lose control of their last stronghold, Granada, January 2nd, 1492. Okay, the Spanish Granada Wars. But when we look at the Khoisan have the oldest DNA on the planet. The Khoisan are the short-statured Africans that go all around the world. Okay, and they were here in the land we call the United States of America. Now, an October 2012 genetic study published in Science magazine found that the Khoisan in Southern Africa are the oldest ethnic group of modern humans, with their ancestral line originating about 100,000 years ago. The Khoisan, formerly called by the derogatory term Bushmen, are also called pygmies, another derogatory term, are genetically unique, and no other currently known population had separated so early from our common modern human ancestor, according to the report. Now, these are two Khoisan women right here, okay? And short-statured Africans, the ancestors to the Ainu and the Twa. Now, the Khoisan live mainly in southern Africa, territory spanning Botswana, Namibia, Angola, Zambia, Zimbabwe, and South Africa. They are largely divided into two groups, hunters and gatherers, or gatherers, known as the Sans people, and keepers of the livestock, known as the Khoi people. Now, Sara Baartman, Sara J. Baartman, Hottentot Venus, who was the Nicki Minaj, the Cardi B, the Megan Thee Stallion of her time, because she was paraded around Europe and shown off in freak shows as a freak of nature. She had huge buttocks, okay? She suffered from steatopygia, which is fatty deposits around the buttocks and thighs. She was a Khoisan woman. She had large breasts, and she is going to die, it's believed, of suicide around 26 years old, and it's also believed that she became a prostitute as well, okay? So you go study, and I actually did a video dealing with the history of Sara J. Baartman, who was Khoisan, who was Khoi. You see striking parallels between her and Megan Thee Stallion, Cardi B, Nicki Minaj, Ruby Rose, Sexy Red, Sukihana, except she was sold into slavery, doing it unwillingly. Today, we've been convinced to dehumanize ourselves for money, and we do it willingly. Let that sink in. Now, the Khoisan languages include the distinctive click sounds, the click language, that are not found in the languages of their neighbors. There's a good article from AtlantaBlackStar.com called 5 Ethnic Groups That Prove the First Humans Were Black. 5 ethnic groups that prove the first humans were black. Okay, so we go through and look at this history, look at archaeological discoveries, all different types of things like this, and provide you with the evidence. Okay, and if we go back here to the course outline, and like I said, I've been teaching this class since 2017, and the course has evolved immensely since 2017. Okay, and here, this is the first time that I've taught the class when I have the whole course outline completed up front and published as well. Okay, so you all can check this out at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. You can register for this online class right now. The content is PG-13. You can use this information with your children also. Okay. We talk about the film Black Panther. The film Black Panther deals with African history, African culture, African language, African spiritual systems. There are 11 different African cultures that we see represented in the film Black Panther, but also the language spoken in the film Black Panther is a Bantu language called isiXhosa. Okay, isiXhosa is a real African language. So we deal with that. And then we talk about the skit from the Richard Pryor show, 1977, where Richard Pryor is a Egyptologist, 1909 is 1909 in Egypt. And this deals with why the history and culture, or why all this was stolen. He comes across the book of Coming Forth by Day, or what they call the book of life in the skit. So we talk about Bantu languages as well, like Kwanzaa is a Bantu language. And there's also a piece that deals with Black Panther Wakanda Forever is rich in mythology. And it talks about the real life African and indigenous inspirations behind what we see in the film Black Panther. Okay. One of the things I deal with early in the class is the term African American. And we go through early on to dispel a lot of this misinformation that's floating around out here. A lot of people, and I don't know where this lie started, but a lot of people are under the misinformation, under the misimpression or misinformation that the term African American was created by the Reverend Jesse Jackson. That's blatantly false. Now we know Reverend Jesse Jackson, as well as other African-American scholars, reintroduced the term African-American in the late 1980s, right around 1988, 1989. Okay. But as I posted on Facebook, and I posted it again today, this is an excerpt from the book Malcolm X Speaks. And we know we just commemorated the 59th anniversary of the assassination of Malcolm X, February 21st, 1965. In the Ballad of the Bullet, April 3rd, 1964, when Malcolm delivers the Ballad of the Bullet in Cleveland, Ohio, at Corey Methodist Church, he uses the term African American. And on page 36 of this book, in the Ballad of the Bullet, he uses the term African American. And what I'm going to do is, let's see here. Let's throw this up. Try to expand this as much as I can. Let's look at this here. So here's the post. I also posted this on our fan page, the African History Network as well. Right here. Let's go to this. Okay, I said, for some reason, people are shocked when I tell them that Malcolm X used the term African American in the speech, the Ballad of the Bullet, April 3rd, 1964, in Cleveland, Ohio. For some reason, many people operate under a myth that Reverend Jesse Jackson created this term. He did not. Reverend Jackson reintroduced the term, but since most of our people don't understand history, they fall for the myth. The pages referenced are from the book Malcolm X Speaks. It looks at some key speeches he made in 1963 to 95. I think it's also important to note Willie Lynch never historically existed, and the Willie Lynch letter 1712 has proven to be a fraud, which is true. Willie Lynch never historically existed. That's one of the biggest frauds in history. Research professor Manu Ampem, who's a friend of mine, I'll be interviewing him sometime in late March 2024. Research professor Manu Ampem for more information on this topic. Please note the term African American is as old as, so read the article from NOLA.com, NOLA. The term African American is as old as America itself, reports. But when we look at this here, this is from pages 36 and 37 of the Ballad of the Malcolm X Speaks, the book Malcolm X Speaks, edited with prefatory notes by George Brightman. And Malcolm says, right now in this country, if you and I, 22 million African Americans, that's what we are, Africans who are in America, you're nothing but Africans, nothing but Africans. In fact, you get farther calling yourself African instead of Negro. Okay. But check this out. Now, also at blackpast.org, and blackpast.org has thousands of pages, about 6,000 pages of articles dealing with African history and African American history. They have the transcript of the Ballad of the Bullet speech, and let me see which date is this. Because Malcolm gave that speech a few times. He delivered it April 12th, 1964 in Detroit, Michigan at King Solomon Baptist Church. But let me pull this up from Black Past. Because I was just looking at it a couple of days ago. And actually, do I have the link in here? Hold on, I thought I had the link. in one of these, I posted the link. Oh, there was a post I did dealing with Malcolm commemorating his the day of his assassination, and I have the link to the Ballad of the Bullet there. But let me pull this up right quick for you. This is at blackpast.org. I want to show people this because, once again, like I said, a lot of us don't understand this history. Okay, so this is at blackpast.org, 1964, Malcolm X, the Ballad of the Bullet. This is the version from April 3rd, 1964 in Cleveland, Ohio. All right. And if we go here, right here, right now in this country, if you and I, 22 million African Americans, that's what we are, Africans who are in America. Okay. This is Malcolm. We were using the term African Americans in the 1960s. I don't know where this lie started that Reverend Jesse Jackson created that term. Professor James Small, one of my teachers personally, he told me personally that he said we were calling ourselves African Americans in the 1960s. So let's, during African American History Month especially, can we please expose these myths and stop spreading these lies? Willie Lynch never historically existed. Jesse Jackson did not create the term African American. African people did not first come here August 20th, 1619. Yes, August 20th, 1619 did happen, but we were here for thousands of years before that. Okay. All right. How you all like this type of information? Give us a thumbs up, give us a heart, give us a like on this broadcast. Now, if you like this type of information, you can support the African History Network a few ways. Be sure to register for the online history classes that I teach on Saturdays. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa, Understand the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We do thousands of years of history and what leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. This is a 10-week class. We're doing more than 10 weeks this time around. Next classes are Saturday, May 4th, Saturday, May 11th, Saturday, May 18th, and Saturday, May 25th, 2024, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Click right here to register here for the class. The class is on sale $60, regularly $130. We do the sessions live. All the sessions are archived and recorded. You can go back and watch it any time. So a year from now, 2 years from now, you can still watch the entire course. We have the lesson plan here for the entire course also already laid out, so you can look at the content that we cover. We deal with 80 to 100 articles, and I put together this class. I've been teaching this class on and off since 2017. Okay, I've been studying history 34 years now. Do lectures across the country. Been hosting the African History Network show 14 years, but we look at there's over 200 slides that I put together, 80 to 100 articles that we'll go through and look at, the 15 books that we reference. You don't have to buy any of these books to follow along in class. I'll show you excerpts of the books on the screen usually. And we look at video clips of interviews I've done with historians like Professor James Small, Professor Kabahai Wafa-Kamene, Anthony Browder, who wrote Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization, which is one of the books we use in the class, Runoko Rashidi, who wrote Black Star, The African Presence in Early Europe, which is another book that we use in the class. Okay, so you can register for this. This content is PG-13. You can use this information with your children as well. Visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Okay, and we'll post the link here. The link's in the thread of this broadcast. And you can support us through PayPal and Cash App, $ the AHN show through Cash App, $ the AHN show through Cash App, and through PayPal, paypal.me / the AHN show. So we have the information right here on the website as well. This is our official Cash App account, $ the AHN show, SHOW. When you go to it, it'll say Michael and show my picture there. These are fake African History Network Cash App accounts here that have been stealing money from us. There are a few other ones out there I've identified. I'm still trying to get them shut down. You can click right here on our link and it shows our QR code, okay, for Cash App. This helps us stay on the air, keep doing the research, pay some of the bills, etc. Upgrade equipment, take care of what needs to be done. You will never look at history the same way once you take this class. This class is going to blow your mind. I guarantee it. All right, so we look at the term African American, and the earliest recorded uses of the term African American goes back to 1782 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I talk about the pyramid principle, okay? Because when I teach with two of my teachers, Dr. Linda Jeffries and Professor Teach, they talk about the pyramid principle, and I use this in a lot of my lectures. And the reason why is it helps us get a better understanding of how to use the history and culture. Okay, it's more than just speaking African languages, wearing African clothing, playing djembe drums, eating African food, things like this, right? So here's a picture of the pyramid of Khafre at Giza, and a pyramid has three sides. At the foundation of the pyramid is African history and culture. Okay. It's African history and culture that gives us our foundation. It gives us our values, our interests, and our principles, our VIPs, our values, our interests, and our principles. This gives us our self-esteem, our self-development, our self-worth. It gives us a cultural paradigm that we see reality through. In our history and culture, especially our history, teaches us about our accomplishments, our achievements, who we've been, where we've been, okay? Now, a people's history and culture teaches them how to deal with the problems of the past in the present and the future to meet the needs of the community. Now, it's that history and culture, that foundation, that influence our economic empowerment. It influences how we engage in economics, our understanding of economics, and what we do with our economics, what we do with our money. Our $1.6 trillion GDP, gross domestic product, that African Americans have, influences the type of businesses that we have, the type of institutions that we build, but also how we engage in economics. Do we use white capitalism dressed up in red, black, and green and pass this off as black economics or black capitalism? Or do we understand the cooperative system, cooperative economics, the co-ops, which is based upon principles that we brought with us from Africa, okay? And when we study the Free African Society of 1787, we study the Colored Merchants Association in 1928. We study the Colored Farmers Union of about 1886 in Texas. They're operating based upon the cooperatives, where the members of these organizations are also owners, and they work together to help one another prosper and survive. So these are ancient principles, and every ethnic group in America use their history and culture to fight for scarce wealth, power, and resources. And for African Americans, we've largely been stripped of our history and culture. And we're trying to adopt European principles for business and European principles for economic empowerment, things like that, that largely don't work for us. We need to study these Tulsa, Oklahoma, Black Wall Street, North Tulsa, because it was the true reformers cooperative founded in 1881 that helped produce a lot of the prosperity that they had. Okay. Yes, oil was discovered there in the early 1900s. Yes, some of the early landowners got land because of the Black Freedmen Indian treaties of 1866. That's true. I deal with all that history. But also you had cooperatives there also. Okay. So when we study our history, we see a deep, rich history of cooperative economics. So we deal with that to get a better understanding of the cooperatives. Okay. We talk about Dr. David Imhotep as well. and the first Americans were Africans, documented evidence. We look at archaeological discoveries, like the one out of the Greek island of Crete in 2010, where they found stone tools on the Greek island of Crete that date back at least 130,000 years ago. But Crete has been an island for more than 5 million years. So they believe that those people had to have sailed there. Okay. So these would have been African people. Okay. And they believe that those people had to have sailed there. All right. Which puts, see, now scholars like Runoko Rashidi and Dr. Charles Finch, they've been telling us for years that modern man is 300,000 years old, as opposed to 75,000 to 100,000 years old. So we know at least 130,000 years of our history has been stolen. So these archaeological discoveries like this don't surprise me, but we deal with them in the class. Okay. We talk about the Khoisan of Southern Africa have the oldest DNA on the planet. There's a good article, Africa's oldest ethnic group fights to keep ancestral land away from Amazon. We talk about Sara Baartman. And then we look at the adultification bias in African-American girls, and how studies show that adults perceive African-American girls to need less nurturing and know more about sex than white girls at an earlier age. Need less nurturing and know more about sex than white girls at an earlier age. Where on earth, where in the world would they get something like that from? Where would they get a stereotype like that from? Well, I don't know. I'll be damned. Could it have been passed down for decades throughout history? Is that a holdover from slavery, when African-American women were sold into slavery as prostitutes and wet nurses, or just sold as breeders? Okay, where in the world could something like that come from? What could continue to perpetuate these negative stereotypical images and ideology that get projected onto African-American girls? I don't know. Now, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, who I interviewed 3 times on the African History Network show, Dr. Welsing correctly told us that, let me pull up this slide here. She correctly told us, she said, we're the only people on this entire planet who have been taught to sing and praise our demeanment. I'm a bitch. I'm a hoe. I'm a gangster. I'm a thug. I'm a dog. If you can train people to demean and degrade themselves, you can oppress them forever. You can even program them to kill themselves, and they won't even understand what happened. Now, unfortunately, I made the mistake of watching Megan Thee Stallion's performance at the Essence Festival 2023, because on Hulu, if you have the Hulu streaming service, they had the Essence Music Festival prime time, and they streamed it live on Hulu. They streamed it live on Hulu. So I saw the weekend. It started like 7 p.m. at night, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So I watched different performances. Trina performed. I saw Janelle Monáe. I saw Lauryn Hill perform. I saw a number of different performances. Megan Thee Stallion came on. She was the last performance on Sunday. It was actually early Monday morning, because she came on, I think she came on about 1 a.m., something like that. And go back and watch my videos where I talked about how horrific her performance was, the vulgar language, the sexually explicit language. And I saw Trina's performance, you know, the baddest bee Trina. Okay. You don't know Nan, Trina, that, you know, had the song with Trick Daddy. If you listen to Trina's lyrics in her performance and Megan Thee Stallion's lyrics, Megan Thee Stallion made Trina sound like Mother Goose. Megan Thee Stallion made Trina look like a Girl Scout. we think we're progressing in this area of the music. No, we're not. We're regressing. And the music is being weaponized against us. And too many of us don't understand history enough to understand the warfare that is being waged against us through the media, through the music. If you want to destroy a nation, you do it through the music, because the music hits the youth first. And they're least equipped to be able to fight back against it, to understand what's going on. Read the article from okplayer.com. India Ari criticizes Megan Thee Stallion and Janelle Monáe for Sexual Essence Festival performances. Also, watch my critique of the song WAP by Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion, where I said they will only allow Negroes to put out music like this. They're not going to allow they will never allow Taylor Swift to put out a song like that, because you only protect what you respect. You only protect what you respect. They will never allow a top white female artist to put out sexually explicit lyrics like that, because they know it will bring about the mistreatment of white girls and white women. Now, yes, is there some mistreatment of white girls and white women? Yeah, ain't nothing like black women, nothing like the mistreatment of black girls. And they know if you put out music like that, it justifies the mistreatment. That's why they only allow us to do that. I had somebody say, oh, but Madonna had lyrics. Yeah, show me lyrics from Madonna as sexually explicit as what? From Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion. They got 60 million views over the first weekend that the video was released and uploaded to Cardi B's YouTube channel. It got 13 million views the first day. It was released on a Friday. That weekend, it got 60 million views. Show me something equivalent that white people are doing, sexually explicit like that, that blows up on social media like that. They don't do that, because you only protect what you respect. They allow Negroes to do that because that's how they expect us to act, because that's how we've been programmed. All right, now. So class number 3, we look at the study done with 130,000 years, the stone tools found on the Greek island of Crete 130,000 years ago. We look at the 2 lost Egyptian cities that we'll look at in the class. One is Tanis Heraklion, which was discovered it was revealed back in 2013. Tanis Heraklion, the lost city of Egypt. And it's believed that it sunk into the ocean about 1,200 years ago. The second one that we'll look at is called Dazzling Aten, and that was discovered just a few years ago. Dazzling Aten, another lost city of Egypt. We'll talk about the 17 pyramids that were found buried underneath Egypt in 2011. And what you're going to find is you're going to have civilizations built on top of civilizations, and they use infrared technology, infrared satellite that can look underneath the earth, and they discovered 17 pyramids buried underneath Egypt. Okay. Another fantastic archaeological discovery. So we look at also what are co-ops to get a better understanding of cooperative economics. So many people talk about co-ops, but oftentimes they never clearly define what a co-op is. Now, Dr. Jessica Gordon Nimhard probably wrote the best book, or at least one of the best, dealing with co-ops. The name of her book is Collective Courage. So this is one of the books we cite in the class. You don't have to buy any of these books to follow along in class. Collective Courage, A History of African-American Cooperative Economic Thought and Practice. And I interviewed Dr. Jessica Gordon Nimhard back in 2014 because she was speaking here in Detroit. I interviewed her, and in the book, she gives example after example of example throughout our history of us using co-ops. And this is a part of history that is not talked about a lot. But what are co-ops? The Black cooperative movement has always been parallel to the Black liberation and civil rights movement. We've mostly heard about the political side of the movement, but you can't name a major Black political leader that didn't point to cooperatives as a pathway to freedom. There's a good article, and this is this article right here probably, I think, was when I first found out about Dr. Jessica Gordon Nembhard, before I did the interview with her. It's called Stop Saying Black People Don't Support Each Other Economically. This is from news1.com, June 30th, 2014. Okay. And as Dr. Francis Cress Wilson, we see there was a resurgence of cooperatives when COVID-19 hit. Mutual aid networks find roots in communities of color. Amid the unfolding disaster of COVID-19 have been moments of generosity, whether it's people pulling together support for college students who've been tossed out of dorms, or collecting money to help restaurant workers, street vendors, and movie theater employees pay for their medicine, groceries, and rent. These mutual aid support networks, in which communities take responsibility to care for one another rather than leaving individuals to fend for themselves, have proliferated across the country as the pandemic turns lives upside down. The nonprofit organization Town Hall Project created Mutual Aid Hub to track all the various collective efforts when the coronavirus began its rapid global spread in March 2020. Back then, it counted only 50 mutual aid groups, but by May 2020, the number grew to more than 800 in 48 states, driven by what the hub's lead organizer, Shivani Desai, D-E-S-A-I, called a, quote, grassroots explosion of organizing, end quote, a grassroots explosion of organizing. Dr. Jessica Gordon Nembhard, author of Collective Courage, said Black mutual aid societies date back to the 1700s, like the Free African Society in 1787. Free Black Americans pooled resources to buy farms and land, care for widows and children, and bury their dead. Okay, and bury their dead. Many started credit unions, which is one of the oldest forms of cooperatives and still exists today. Credit unions, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, gained a lot of media attention in 2023 for starting a credit union. Many started credit unions when banks would not serve them. Sociologist and civil rights leader Dr. W.B. Du Bois wrote about enslaved Black Americans pooling money to buy each other's freedom. Okay, so this is in our history, and it comes from African culture. The African Union Society in Rhode Island was established in 1780 as the first Black mutual aid society on record, Dr. Jessica Gordon Nembhard said. The second was the Free African Society, which was founded in 1787 in Philadelphia by Richard Allen and Absalom Jones. And it was founded to provide aid to freed slaves who were denied resources by white institutions. One of the most famous examples of mutual aid are the Black Panther Party survival programs from the late 1960s, through which members distributed shoes, transported elders to grocery stores, offered breakfasts to children, and more. Okay, so this is in our history. Now, like I said, a people's history and culture teaches them how to deal with the problems of the past in the present and the future to meet the needs of the community. And what's happened is we've largely lost that history. We largely don't know that history of how we were economically successful in the past, even those who were freed during slavery, and how many of them were able to economically prosper. Okay. All right, so let me continue. All right, so we talk about Dr. Jessica Gordon Nembhard. We talk about this discovery, this dealing with DNA, Y chromosome in father of all humankind is 340,000 years old. Dealt with a man named Albert Perry in South Carolina who found his DNA traces back to an ancestor 340,000 years ago, about 338,000 years ago. We're older than we thought. New find pushes human origin back 100,000 years. This is the article from NBCnews.com. Now, when these archaeological discoveries take place, all the news outlets have these articles. NBC, ABC, CBS, MSNBC, CNN, NBC News. A lot of times, even Fox News has articles on this. Now, on cable news, you may only see 30 seconds to a minute, if that. But all these news outlets, you go online, they have articles on these archaeological discoveries. We talk about the African presence in Asia and the Khoisan, Sara Baartman, Sara J. Baartman. Another discovery, mastodon skeleton found in California, dates back about 130,000 years ago. And the paleontologists are saying that the skeleton was smashed apart, and the way it was smashed apart had to be smashed apart by humans. Okay, now if that's true, that puts an African presence in California 130,000 years ago. Okay, so we talk about the native Africans, the Negritos, who were the first inhabitants of the Philippines. Why the endangered African tribesmen in India shot dead an American missionary with an arrow. All right, that deals with the Sentinelese in the Andaman Islands, the Sentinelese. Okay, this is a remote group of Africans in the Andaman Islands. We look at an article that Dr. Runoko Rashidi wrote, Before Enslavement, Africans, Ancient Diaspora. He wrote this article for AtlantaBlackStar.com. I interviewed Runoko 6 times. So I share an excerpt of an interview I did with Runoko. I think it may have been my last interview with him, because we were trying to set up another interview before he passed away. Inside Egypt's 3,000-year-old lost golden city. That's the other lost golden city of Egypt that lost city of Egypt we look at. The documentary, Global Assignment, the documentary on Runoko Rashidi, Tony Browder's involved in that. So that has just been released. So that's showing in different cities. Follow Tony Browder on Facebook for more information on that. And then we talk about the judgment scene coming out of ancient Kemet as well, where we see the balance of the scales and the scales of Ma'at by Anpu or Anubis, the jackal-headed deity. We look at an excerpt from the first Americans were Africans documented evidence dealing with the Olmec heads in Mexico and the Mandinka Egyptian Olmec connection. There's an excerpt from the Rock Newman show, Black Egyptians Entered America 2,500 years ago. It was an interview he did with Tony Browder. And we deal with, way before Columbus, ancient Malayans from Mali sailed to the Americas. That was in 1311 AD. That was the year before Mansa Musa becomes emperor of the Mali Empire, which was 1312 AD. Okay. So we go through and we look at a timeline of history. We go through and look at these articles that deal with some ancient history to get a better understanding of how all this history evolves. We look at some ancient African civilizations. We talk about Kemet, Egypt, Nubia, Zimbabwe. We go through and look at this history. Okay. Ancient Nubia, founded around 4,500 BCE, which is the mother of Kemet, mother of Egypt, the first monarchy in recorded history. We talk about a little bit about the Kandakis and Amana Shikito, Queen Amana Shikito. Egypt on the Tony Browder is a fantastic book, and we spend some time looking at that as well. Egypt on the Potomac, because Egypt on the Potomac deals with how the layout of Washington, D.C. is based upon the layout of ancient Kemet, ancient Egypt. All right. And many of the founding fathers referred to Washington, D.C. as Egypt of the West. Okay. Egypt of the West. So when we look at the Washington Monument, that's 555 feet tall. The Washington Monument is a copy. It was actually a ancient African symbol of resurrection called a Tekken, coming from the story of Sara Baartman and Heru, who the Greeks called Osiris, Isis, and Horus. And there were about 1,200 Tekkenu all throughout ancient Kemet, ancient Egypt. Okay. Today, they're less than 12 today. Today, they're less than 12. So we see a picture here of a Tekkenu, or a Tekken for singular, Tekkenu for plural. We see this here in Egypt, and we see that they've been taken to other cities around the world. Tekkenu from ancient Egypt, taken to cities around the world. London, England, New York City, Paris, France, as we see the ones here. There's a good article from face-to-faceafrica.com called Cleopatra's Needle, How 3 Ancient Egyptian Obelisks Ended Up in New York City, London, England, and Paris, France. And in this, an excerpt of the article says, ancient Egyptians called obelisks Tekkenu. Now you will see Tekkenu spelled a few different ways. And they were also used to tell the time in the past. They were also used to tell the time in the past. Their pinnacles were basically covered in gold to reflect the sunlight. Historians say that obelisks represented immortality and eternity, and their long structure helped connect the heavens and the earth. Currently, Cleopatra's Needle is the name given to 3 ancient Egyptian obelisks, one in New York City, one in London, England, one in Paris, France. However, they do not all come from one Egyptian site. Okay. The obelisks in New York and London are carved out of red granite from the quarries of Aswan, a major source of stone for Egyptian antiquities. The 2 obelisks were commissioned by Nesubiti or Pharaoh Thutmose III for the Temple of the Sun in Heliopolis near modern-day Cairo, with each weighing about 224 tons and 68 feet tall. Okay, so this is African culture taken around the world, but most of us don't associate it with Africa. We associate it with the people who are in those areas where it's taken. We think it's something that white people created. Oh, the Washington Monument. That's named after George Washington. We think it's something white people created. But the foundation of Freemasonry are the teachings from the ancient Egyptian mystery system. Okay? Now, here's a famous statue of Sara Baartman and Heru, who the Greeks called Osiris, Isis, and Horus. Asar, the father, is in the middle. And in the class we deal with, Heru being born of a virgin birth on December 25th. And where a lot of this stuff comes from. Okay? So that gets recycled and reinterpreted through various people's cultures over thousands and thousands of years. There are approximately 1,200 Tekkenu or obelisks built in ancient Kemet, but only about a dozen are found today, or less than a dozen are found today in Egypt. Many of the Tekkenu removed from Egypt are now in Istanbul, Turkey, London, England, Paris, France, Berlin, Germany, New York City, Rome, Italy, Vatican City, and elsewhere throughout the world. The Tekkenu are now called obelisks by their new owners, and few know their origin or that they symbolize the resurrection of the African king Asar. Now, this is from page 17 of Egypt on the Potomac by Tony Browder. Tony's a friend of mine. I just interviewed Tony. That was March of 2023. We talked about the importance of Nile Valley civilization history. Okay. That interview got about over 50,000 views on our YouTube channel. My YouTube channel is Michael Imhotep, Imhotep. You can go check out that interview. This is a copy of Egypt on the Potomac right here. Just bear with me because I have books all over the office. I need to get another bookshelf. This is Egypt on the Potomac right here. This is one of the books we use in the class. Once again, you don't have to buy any of these books. We show you excerpts on the screen. But this is an excellent book to get. Egypt on the Potomac, as well as Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization by Tony Browder. Okay. Now, when we look at Freemasonry, because we have to look at Freemasonry, we look at that in the class, in the relationship to ancient Egypt, ancient Kemet, the Nile Valley region of Africa. The word Mason is derived from the Latin words mass and sun. Mass and sun, S-O-N. Mason means child of light and expresses the desire to pursue light, which is a metaphor for the sun, which symbolizes knowledge. The term child of light, or sons and daughters of light, was first used to identify students who had completed 42 years of study in the temples of ancient Kemet. Many Masonic temples were modeled after the temples of ancient Kemet, places where light or knowledge was imparted in a series of steps or degrees. So the whole concept of going to institutions of higher learning and getting your credentials in a series of degrees, associate's degree, bachelor's degree, master's degree, PhD, that whole concept comes out of ancient Kemet, in the ancient Egyptian mystery system, out of the temples, where they went to study for 42 years. The concept of liberal arts, okay? And in Stolen Legacy by George G.M. James, he talks about the 7 liberal arts and the arithmetic and the logic and things like this. He talks about the quivium and the quadrivium, the trivium and the quadrivium, I think it is. But all that comes out of the Nile Valley region of Africa. We associate most of this stuff with Europeans. They learn from us. They learn from us. This is why, if you've seen any of my information dealing with the fight for what people call reparations, reparative justice, my whole concept of reparations as a historian is much different than a lot of this stuff floating around. The reason why, first of all, you have to understand the root concept of reparations means to repair, to make you whole again, to restore you to a state before the damage that was done, to repair a harm that was done. Okay. If we're talking about repairing the damage done to African Americans, you first have to analyze who African people were and what African people had before they were put into an institution of slavery that largely stripped us of our history, culture, language, spiritual systems, folklore, mores, family ties, nationality, okay? Cosmology. Cosmology deals with the understanding of the universe as an orderly system. Cosmogony deals with the understanding of the origins of the universe, and that's based upon people's culture. You have to analyze who we were before we were put into the institution of slavery and what we had. If you want to talk about repairing the damage of something, if you start the conversation with us already enslaved, stripped of those things, that means you don't understand that you don't understand. This is why trying to equate reparations with cash payments only, and you think you can repair that damage with just cash payments, and you're going to give a people who've been stripped, who most of us still hold the last names of our former slave masters and have been taught to hate ourselves, who have been psychologically damaged, If we all got $1 million a day, white people will have it all back by this time next week. And you haven't repaired the damage because you haven't properly assessed the harm that was done because you don't understand the history. Very few people want to be honest enough and say this. I don't give a damn. I'll tell you the truth. I'm not trying to raise money for the next reparations conference. I'm going to tell you the truth. Secondly, you have to understand the history of the laws and policies put in place that inflicted the harm in the first place. This is why the California Reparations Task Force, the final report that came out June 29, 2023 is so important. That 1,000-page report that lays out 12 harms, okay, and lays out 115 policy recommendations. This is why that's so important, because they are looking at fairly analyzing the damage that was done, okay, and they're talking about remedies for the damage that was done. This goes way beyond cash payments. People operate based on people haven't. I can listen to people tell they haven't done the research. So they just equate the damage that was done to cash payments. No, you don't understand the history. So my Kwanzaa presentation I did December 27th, 2023 at King Solomon Baptist Church. I talked about some of this. And I'm going to go to, let me see, let's pull this up. Let's go to this. I want to show this quickly here. Because most people haven't read the executive summary. You read the 74-page executive summary, you get a much better understanding of this. I've read the executive summary. I read the executive summary of the initial report, the 500-page report. The California report highlights a history of moral and legal wrongs. Over 13 chapters and about 500 pages, the interim report's authors recount the moral and legal wrongs the American and Californian governments have inflicted upon their own Black citizens and residents, noting how slavery and subsequent discrimination have exposed Black communities to racial terror and political disenfranchisement, left them with inferior outcomes in health and wealth building, and neglected them and relegated them to segregated neighborhoods and schools. Now, California became a state in the Union in 1850. When they became a state in the Union, they abolished slavery. Now, historians have identified at least 1,500 people who were in some type of semi-slavery state or status. Some people put the number at 4,000. California was not Texas. In June of 1865, when Major General Gordon Granger goes into Texas to deliver General Order Number 3, which we commemorate during Juneteenth, there were 250,000 enslaved Africans in Texas. California is not Texas. California's history is totally different than Texas. But the reparations reactionaries haven't studied the history. So they think California is the same as Texas and Mississippi, Alabama. No. But California does have a deep history of racism. Okay, racism, segregation, redlining, housing discrimination, political disenfranchisement, etc. So they lay out 12 harms here in their final report. Well, in the interim report and the final report. 1, enslavement. 2, racial terror. 3, political disenfranchisement. 4, housing segregation. 5, separate and unequal education. 6, racism in environment and infrastructure. Okay. 7, pathologizing the Black family. 8, control over creative, cultural, and intellectual life. That deals with our royalties being stolen from us in like the music industry. Okay. That's what that's talking about. 9, stolen labor and hindered opportunity. 10, an unjust legal system. 11, mental and physical harm and neglect. 12, the racial wealth gap. So then they go through and they show how laws and policies at the federal level harmed African Americans across the country, and then specifically how laws and policies, similar laws and policies in the state of California harmed African Americans. So their 115 policy recommendations are designed to repair that damage, or at least begin to repair that damage. That's the result of the 12 harms. That's the result of laws and policies. It was laws and policies that put us in this predicament. It's going to be laws and policies that take us out of this. This goes way beyond a check. Because once you spend the money, the laws and policies are still in place, inflicting the harm. You haven't scratched the surface. This is what a lot of people don't understand. Now, ideally, some form of cash payments can be part of a comprehensive reparations package. Ain't no way in the hell. Understanding history and law, no in the hell reparations should just be cash payments. You're not going to repair anything. And by this time next week, white people have most of that back. And the only thing you've done is stimulated their economy. And those laws and policies that continue to inflict the harm, that maldistribute wealth, power, and resources, those historical, those structural inequities, they will still be there. They haven't changed. But the Amazon website will crash every 10 minutes. The Mercedes-Benz showrooms will be empty. But the health disparities, maternal deaths of African American women, 3 times more likely to die during pregnancy or pregnancy-related deaths, that'll still be there. When you look at us being discriminated against, when you look at the values of our homes and valued at $48,000 less than comparable white homes, which is a collective $156 billion, as the Brookings Institute documented a few years ago, that'll still be there. So we have to understand comprehensive reparations, but first you have to analyze, you have to study the history of what happened. And this is the interim report right here. This is the executive summary from the interim report. Just Google California Reparations Task Force, it will come up. And then I have the link here also. You can go to oag.ca.gov, Office of Attorney General, oag.ca.gov. That's Rob Bonta in California. Just search for the California Reparations Report because they have the final report right here. And then you can read the full final report. You can look at the executive summary. It's broken up into chapters, all of that. Okay, give us a thumbs up, give us a like, give us a heart on this broadcast. Be sure to register for this 10-week online history course that I teach ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa. Understand the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. So we talk about Egypt on the Potomac. I saw an interview that Tony Browder did on News One Now with Roland Martin back in 2015. We talk about Abubakar II coming to the Americas also in 1311. Let's see. Class number 6, we deal with the African origins of Star Wars and the Asarian drama, the story of Asar, Aset, and Heru, who the Greeks called Osiris, Isis, and Horus, and how George Lucas, father of Star Wars, had a mentor named Joseph Campbell. And Joseph Campbell wrote a book called The Power of Myths, or the power of myth. And Joseph Campbell taught him about all these myths. One of those myths was about Asar, Auset, and Heru. We look at excerpts from Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization by Tony Browder and deal with the story of Asar, Auset, Heru, and the virgin birth. Heru being born on December 25th to the virgin Auset. We talk about Benjamin Banneker as well, and the surveying of Washington, D.C., the Dogon tribe of Mali and Burkina Faso, who discovered the invisible star centuries before Galileo invented the telescope. And they talked about the Series A and Series B star systems. We look at an excerpt of an interview I did with Professor Kaba Hiawatha Khamenei dealing with the African origins of Star Wars and the Assyrian drama. Talks some about Queen Tia, the 18th dynasty, the wife of Amenhotep III, mother of Akhenaten and grandmother of Pharaoh or Nasubiti King Tutankhamun. The relationship between Memphis, Tennessee, and Memphis, Egypt. Talk about the Druids in Ireland and how the Druids were practicing a watered-down version of the teachings from ancient Kemet, from ancient Egypt. And the Druids being killed by a British slave named Patrick, who became canonized as a saint. So in class 7, we talk about Hannibal Barca, and we know that Denzel Washington is going to portray Hannibal Barca, the Carthaginian general, in a movie directed by Antoine Fuqua, director Antoine Fuqua. I did a video about that. So we talk about Carthage. And Carthage is one of those African empires that Europeans try to claim as their own. So, and we do a Hannibal Barca, Publius Cornelius Scipio, and the Battle of Zama 202 BC. We talk about the Battle of Cannae 216 BC, one of the greatest military victories in history, where Hannibal defeats the Roman army. The Roman army has about 80,000 men. Hannibal has 50,000. He's one of the greatest military strategists in history. And we deal with why Africa was not named after Publius Cornelius Scipio, because he takes the surname Africanus, and Africanus is Latin, means belonging to Africa. He takes the surname Africanus after he defeats Hannibal Barca at the Battle of Zama in 202 BC. So once again, we have that whole history backwards. We look at the relationship between the teachings coming out of the Nile Valley region of Africa and the development of European secret societies. We look at Joie de Piet, Black Pete, who was a Moor and was the sidekick to Sinterklaas, Saint Nicholas. And this is the precursor to Santa Claus. This is the precursor to Santa Claus. This is where Santa Claus comes from, with the red and white outfit. Comes from Bishop Nicholas. Right here. So there's a whole backstory to this myth also. So we deal with that. Let me pull up the slide. So we deal with this also in the class, because this shows it continues to show the influence of the African Moors. And in the Netherlands, in early November, they celebrate Sinterklaas and Joie de Piet coming to the Netherlands, coming on a steamboat from Spain. And we know it was the Iberian Peninsula, Spain and Portugal, where the Moors go in 711 AD, led by Tariq ibn Ziyad, and the Moors are going to conquer the southern portion of Spain. All right, so let's go back to the course outline. So we look at what is a patron saint and what is the relationship between patron saints in Christianity and the Neteru in ancient Kemet, ancient Egypt. Queen Charlotte Sophia, who was of African Moorish ancestry on her mother's side, and she was the wife of King George III, who was the King of England during the American Revolutionary War. This is who the 13 colonies are revolting against. 1775 to 1783, the American Revolutionary War. We look at who were the Moors and look at some of the history of the Moors in Europe. Tariq ibn Ziyad invading Europe, invading the Iberian Peninsula, 711 AD. We look at Saint Maurice as well, who was a Moor and the patron saint of Germany. Why are African Moors heads on the national flags of Corsica and Sardinia? This is some more information showing the history of the Moors and the presence of the Moors in Europe. These African Moors heads, because the Moors were there in Corsica and Sardinia, and it took a monumental effort to defeat them. So they're right on the national flags of these island nations. All right, going back to the course outline. So class number 8, we look at how did the Moors lose power in Spain? And one of the books we reference is Golden Age of the Moor, edited by Dr. Ivan Van Sertima. I have that book around here somewhere. Oh, right here. Golden Age of the Moor. One of the best books dealing with the history of the Moors during the medieval time and in Europe. Golden Age of the Moor, edited by Dr. Ivan Van Sertima. Dr. Jose Pimenta Bay is one of the baddest scholars on the history of the Moors. He has a essay in here. Ranoko Rashidi has an essay in here as well. So we talk about the Crusades some, and the first Crusades, 1096 AD. Who were the Knights Templar? And the Knights Templar are important because they were taught by the African Moors. And they learn some of the teachings from ancient Kemet, ancient Egypt, become very powerful. Okay. We look at excerpts from Christopher Columbus and the African Holocaust, Slavery and the Rise of European Capitalism by Dr. John Henrik Clark. Because like I said, Columbus is crucial to understanding the expansion of the transatlantic slave trade. Okay. And we look at where Columbus goes on his 4 voyages. He never comes to the land that we call the United States of America. The closest he comes here is Cuba, which is 90 miles away, about 90 miles away. If we look at this here, let's look at this here. Where's Columbus? Oh, that's the wrong one. Right here, Cristobal Colon. Cristoforo Colombo. Okay. When we look at where he goes on his 4 voyages, and if you go to history.com, official website of the History Channel, and just search for Christopher Columbus, it will show you where he went. He never came to the land we call the United States of America. August 3rd, 1492, he set sail. That's his first voyage. Set sail on the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. He goes into the Bahamas, which he calls San Salvador. He goes into Cuba and Hispaniola. We know the western third of Hispaniola is where the island of Haiti is, but all that was a Spanish colony first. And in 1697, the French are going to take over the western third of the island of Hispaniola. And they're going to name it Saint Dominique. But those Africans are going to have a revolt, okay, and call it Haiti, which we call Haiti. Second voyage, September 1493 goes into the West Indies and Boricuan, Puerto Rico, which we call Puerto Rico today. It goes into Jamaica, 1494, conquers all that territory. Third voyage, May 1498, Trinidad and Venezuelan mainland, South America. Fourth voyage, May 1504, he goes into Panama and Honduras in Central America, conquers all that territory. They're going to set up plantations, especially sugarcane plantations. Early, about 1501, 1502, they start taking Africans into those territories and enslaving them. So this is a deep history. And your understanding of politics is directly related to your understanding of history. So when you start getting to this history, especially looking at Spain, things like this, and what Spain conquered, then you start getting a better understanding of what's going on today. Especially in the second class that I teach, that deals with history from 1800 to 1968. Okay, and then we look at the Portuguese are the first ones involved in the transatlantic slave trade starting in 1441, okay, when they go into what's modern day Mauritania. So class number 9, we look at the doctrine of discovery, Dom Diversis, 1452. What is the papal bull amongst the Catholic Church? The Treaty of Tordesillas, June 7th, 1494. Where the Pope divides the non-Christian world between Spain and Portugal and tells them to go out and conquer the non-Christian world. We look at Spain begins to take African slaves into the Caribbean islands around 1502. King Charles V and the Asiento de Negros. Okay, King Charles V and the Asiento de Negros of 1518, because you can't understand the expansion of the transatlantic slave trade without understanding the Asiento. And oftentimes people talk about the transatlantic slave trade and don't mention the Asiento. Okay, that's Spain. And this was a license that the Spanish crown gave to slave traders to supply Spanish colonies with enslaved African people. What was the middle? We look at what was the middle passage of the transatlantic slave trade to get a better understanding of that. And there was an essay that Dr. Maleficenti Asante wrote in 2010, rebuking and refuting Dr. Henry Louis Skip the Truth Gates, as one of my teachers, Dr. Leonard Jeffrey, calls him, because oftentimes he skips over the truth. Dr. Henry Louis Gates Jr. And it deals with Gates is wrong about the African involvement in the slave trade, because Gates wrote this op-ed for the New York Times in 2010 called Ending the Slavery Blame Game. And he makes the false argument that Africans were as equally culpable for the transatlantic slave trade as Europeans, which is totally false. That's a lack of understanding of history. So this is an excellent article by Dr. Maleficenti Asante, who coined the term Afrocentricity back in the 1980s. We look at the role of insurance that insurance companies played in slavery. When did the first African come to America that we know of by name? That was probably Juan Garrido in 1513 in Florida. Comes into Florida with the Spanish conquistador Juan Ponce de Leon. Bacon's Rebellion of 1675-1676 in Virginia, and how it planted the seeds of race-based slavery, but also planted the seeds of racism that we still see evident today. To understand what's going on today, you have to understand Bacon's Rebellion. You understand Bacon's Rebellion and those that group of about 500 rebels who were being exploited on the tobacco plantations in Virginia, and how they unite. You have enslaved Africans, free African Americans, white indentured servants, poor whites, and they realized that they were all being exploited by the same people. Okay, and they had a rebellion, and in December of 1675, they burned down the town of Jamestown, Virginia. December 1675, they burned down the town of Jamestown, Virginia. Okay, now I don't know if this was the inspiration for the song, the roof is on fire. We don't need no water, you know, but it very well could have been. And there's a good article from Britannica.com, the history of the idea of race, the history of the idea of race. On September 19, 1676, Nathaniel Bacon and his followers returned to Jamestown, Virginia, and battled forces. Let me see, that was September. It was in December 1675 where they burned down the town of Jamestown, Virginia. But this is a deep history here. We deal with did African Americans own slaves and why? Because oftentimes we were buying family members out of slavery. Okay. You did have some people that take advantage of that, but when Dr. Carter G. Woodson did his research on this, he looked at 1840, I think it was, 1840, and he found that almost 50%, is estimated that 50% of African Americans that owned slaves, they were buying family members out of slavery. We saw this in Washington, D.C. also when we dealt with the Compensated Emancipation Act of April 16th, 1862. We deal briefly with the fake Willie Lynch letter, 1712, the tragedy of the Lusden slave ship, January 1st, 1738. And look at the origin of negative images in the media and how they're rooted in slavery and minstrel shows. Okay, that's class 10. So this is, like I said, this is a class where we get deep into the history. You never look at history the same way. There's over 200 slides that we look at, slides that I put together myself, 80 to 100 articles. If you like this type of information, you can support the African History Network a few ways. Be sure to register for the online history classes that I teach on Saturdays. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa, Understand the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We deal with thousands of years of history and what leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. This is a 10-week class. We're doing more than 10 weeks this time around. Next classes are Saturday, May 4th, Saturday, May 11th, Saturday, May 18th, and Saturday, May 25th, 2024, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Click right here to register here for the class. The class is on sale $60, regularly $130. We do the sessions live. All the sessions are archived and recorded. You can go back and watch it any time. So a year from now, 2 years from now, you can still watch the entire course. We have the lesson plan here for the entire course also already laid out, so you can look at the content that we cover. We deal with 80 to 100 articles, and I put together this class. I've been teaching this class on and off since 2017. Okay, I've been studying history 34 years now. Do lectures across the country. Been hosting the African History Network show 14 years, but we look at there's over 200 slides that I put together, 80 to 100 articles that we'll go through and look at, the 15 books that we reference. You don't have to buy any of these books to follow along in class. I'll show you excerpts of the books on the screen usually. And we look at video clips of interviews I've done with historians like Professor James Small, Professor Kabahai Wafa-Kamene, Anthony Browder, who wrote Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization, which is one of the books we use in the class, Runoko Rashidi, who wrote Black Star, The African Presence in Early Europe, which is another book that we use in the class, okay? So you can register for this. Its content is PG-13. You can use this information with your children as well. Visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Okay. And we'll post the link here. The link's in the thread of this broadcast. And you can support us through PayPal and Cash App, $ the AHN show through Cash App, $ the AHN show through Cash App, and through PayPal, paypal.me /the AHN show. So we have the information right here on the website as well. This is our official Cash App account, $ the AHN show, SHOW. When you go to it, it'll say Michael and show my picture there. These are fake African History Network Cash App accounts here that have been stealing money from us. There are a few other ones out there I've identified. I'm still trying to get them shut down. You can click right here on our link and it shows our QR code, okay, for Cash App. This helps us stay on the air, keep doing the research, pay some of the bills, etc. Upgrade equipment, take care of what needs to be done. All right, so look, hopefully you learned a lot today. Register for this course. You can use this information with your children. Like I said, the content is PG-13. It's not overly graphic. I don't do a lot of cursing or anything like that. But you're going to learn so much in this class. This is a great time of the year to start learning this history and take this information with us throughout the year. Okay. All right. So thanks for joining us today. Share this broadcast on your social media platforms. Follow us on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, our Instagram page, The AHN Show, our other social media platforms. Remember, right knowledge corrects wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever. We'll talk to you next time and see you in class.